Easter this year is filled with signs of new life. Our processions are back. Our numbers have increased at church. I was in Florida, and there is no social distancing in churches, no masks. The clergy and ministers of the Eucharist wear the mask only for distributing communion. The sign of peace has been restored, and holy water fountains will be used again from Easter. Travel restrictions everywhere are easing up, and human beings are like birds in springtime. We are singing again. We are happy to be alive. There is a tremendous sense of relief and a restored joy in the hearts and lives of believers. The stone is being rolled away from the tomb created by COVID-19 that was symbolized by lockdowns, social distancing, and many protocol restrictions. On Palm Sunday, we waved our palms freely. And on Good Friday, we walked the Via Dolorosa to Calvary. Yes, and we did all this face to face, not virtually. The signs are clear. There is hope and new life around us. A new day is dawning. We are out of the dumps of stagnation, entombed by a pandemic, and rising to new life. This Easter, we can identify with Jesus, the resurrection and the life, in a new way. Our tombs are opened, and joy has replaced gloom. Light has replaced darkness. Life has replaced death. What a traumatic time we've been through with the pandemic. Imagine an Easter with churches in lockdown, a limited number of 7 persons to celebrate the Easter Vigil in 2020, with an increase in 2021. COVID-19 crushed our spirits, dampened our hopes, and stifled our dreams. We became a world lost in a wilderness, and a church searching for meaning to questions that needed answers, not only from science, but also from faith. How did we survive this traumatic episode in our lives? Was it simply human resilience and our capacity to endure? Was it because of science and our ability to develop vaccines to control viruses? Reflecting on the global experience, there must have been something more that sustained us and empowered us to remain sane, face the COVID-19 challenges, and emerge with experience of new life and new beginnings. We are not afraid to live, but we now live with wisdom and a new awareness of our human frailty and dependence on each other. We were not made to live in isolation, but to be our sisters and our brothers' keeper. What a great lesson a little uncontrollable and dangerous virus has taught us. We, therefore, need to ask ourselves, how much did our faith really impact our experience of being in a wilderness during the COVID-19 pandemic? I spent a few days in the parish of St. Louis in Pinecrest, Florida, between the week before Holy Week and the beginning of Holy Week. At the side of the church is a large sign with the word hope written in individual letters. Above the letters is a star. For those critical days, weeks, months, and years of the pandemic, the parish, which had its contagion, losses, and lived with its limitations, chose to keep hope alive. The people never gave up hope, and hope sustained them. The sign was a constant reminder to them not to lose hope, to keep faith alive, and to trust God to be with them on their journey through the pandemic. The star was their reminder that Jesus was their true hope. They are, therefore, emerging from the traumatic experience of COVID-19, not only with resilience and endurance, but with hope. A hope that is born of faith. A hope that they kept alive in the most difficult and faith-testing times. Their vision of hope sustained them as a community of faith. Without hope, we grieve helplessly and despair. Hope gives us courage and opens the way to new life and new beginnings. Easter is the celebration of new life. We must never forget the journey we have made, the deserts we have crossed, the challenges we overcame, the dark clouds that overshadowed us, the limitations we endured, and those 2 years of uncertainties and hardships with rampant unemployment and very limited resources to sustain us. How did we survive this pandemic? Emotionally, socially, economically, and spiritually. The suffering of the people became the suffering of the church. Yet, in the midst of all the hardships and lack of resources, people never stopped giving, sharing, and looking out for others. More food parcels were given out at the cathedral parish in COVID-19 times than at any other time. There were people who turned up on other people's doorsteps with love offerings and acts of generosity can be multiplied. When the vaccine became available, nations shared with other nations as a great act of solidarity and care. In the midst of COVID-19, there was caring and sharing. There was bonding and outreach. Love was active. The world was being transformed into a family of care and love. Pope Francis led by example and inspired hope in the darkest and most difficult times for the church and the world. He identified hope as necessary for facing calamity, and his voice was a voice of hope. This Easter, we look back with gratitude to all the voices of hope that sustained and inspired us throughout the critical time of the pandemic. We are grateful for our caregivers, scientists, clergy, and leaders in the faith, frontliners, and all those whose good actions and charity made a big difference in other people's lives, especially in the lives of families, the elderly, poor, and vulnerable. We are grateful to our teachers for their adaptability and dedication, and our children and young people for not losing hope, but responding to the challenges they faced with their education and living for long periods without face-to-face contact with their friends. We are grateful to our church and civil leaders for walking with our people during a very difficult time. We are grateful to God, above all, for not abandoning us. In the midst of fears, anxieties, anguish, and uncertainties, there was care and kindness that generated hope. This hope brought peace of mind, family bonding, and creative ways of facing the pandemic. While the losses were great in terms of human lives and all the other impacts on social, economic, and religious institutions, the miracle is that we have lived through a pandemic, experienced its impact on humanity and the times in which we live. Even the mightiest in our world felt its threats and also its venom. It would be an act of ingratitude to all the frontliners who literally laid down their lives for others, indeed for us, if we were to forget their sacrifices, selflessness, dedication, heroism, and generosity in service that saved the lives of so many at the risk of their own lives. A time of despair was transformed into a time of hope. Future generations need to hear this story of generosity and selflessness. At Easter, this becomes a resurrection experience, a story of hope for the world. The frontliners have taught the world the value and worth of human life and the extent to which those who are called to save life are prepared to go. They shared in the pain, anguish, and suffering of their sisters and brothers. When the churches were closed for face-to-face gatherings, the Spirit opened new doors and windows everywhere. The virtual church emerged, meeting the pastoral needs of those shut in, on lockdown, and unable to go to church. The domestic church shone anew, and the light was greater than the darkness. In the future, more church meetings will be conducted by Zoom, which would provide safety for those uncomfortable or unavailable for night meetings. Virtual platforms will cut down on travel expenses globally and provide opportunities for parents to work from home and so have time, more time, for their families. It will also cut down on pollution with fewer vehicles on the road. The pandemic has opened many new possibilities that can benefit both the church and civil society. This Easter, we are celebrating our hope that springs from the resurrection of Christ. We may want to put COVID-19 to sleep, to bury COVID-19 in its tomb. At the same time, the victory is not simply burying COVID-19 and forgetting it. That would be denial. The challenge is to rise from the COVID-19 pandemic with hope, audacity, and gratitude. The risen Christ beckons us to new life with him, who has conquered death, the menace of COVID-19, and anything that puts us into a tomb that extinguishes life. We cannot allow COVID-19 to rob us of our hope or Easter joy. The Easter sequence in the liturgy sums up the mystery for us in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. Death with life contended. Combat strangely ended. Christ, my hope, is risen. With courage and hope, let us rise to new life with Christ this Easter.